I saw a poll put out the other day in the British press which said that 68% of British people thought that the country was fundamentally broken.
I'd love to ask you, what do you think they should do? But it seems the problems are too endemic.
I really think the West is in terminal decline. It doesn't have...
Terminal decline?
Maybe, at least for my lifetime.
It's utterly heartbreaking to me. I don't know what to do about it. I have no idea.
I think that should give us courage, exposure to other people's perspectives.
It's moving us in a good direction.
Why did you move to Hungary?
Well, I thought the West was kind of falling apart, to be honest. I mean, it's terrible. I don't like it. I'm obviously from there. I spent most of my life... I grew up in Ireland, and I lived in the US and in Britain, mainly in Britain. I lived in the US twice, in Boston, if anyone's interested. Yeah. But you're home.
Yes, indeed.
It's a beautiful city, all things told. I like Boston a lot. But, you know, in theory, I like London and Dublin too. But I thought that, look, the decline has been obvious for a while now. The problems in America and Europe are slightly different, but they have some overlap. But the situation, at least in Britain and I think Western Europe as well.
What is the decline?
Well, in Britain, it's a slightly different story to the rest because Britain's kind of been in decline since the end of the Second World War, or at least since the Suez Crisis in 1956.
Oh boy, I don't see it that way at all, but okay.
Or at least since the 70s.
Okay.
Now, it's been a relative decline, so Britain's been able to grow in the post-war period, but it's never been able to catch up with the rest of Europe or with the United States. And people in Britain have known about that relative decline for a long time because Britain used to be the main country. It used to be the America of its day, you know, back before before the First World War, certainly. Debatable before the Second World War. But the decline, relative decline is fine in a sense because your living standards can continue to go up and the society can remain stable, livable, all that. And I think Britain pretty much did in the post-war period. But the decline now has become absolute in Britain. I saw a poll put out the other day in the British press which said that 68% of British people thought that the country was fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 2/3 are saying the country is... They're not saying...
I also believe that.
Well, I think so too. I mean, that's why I left. They're not saying the country's going in the wrong direction. We see those polls all the time. They're saying fundamentally broken.
Right.
Like if I say like my life is kind of bad right now, you're like, it's okay, you get it together. My life is fundamentally broken. Like you're gonna have to see a psychiatrist. You know what I mean? Like that's doom talk, you know. But that's the kind of vibe in the country, and it's a multiple different things. But I think the main thing in Western Europe at the moment is that the living standards are just in decline. And I don't think the economic statistics are capturing how bad the decline actually is.
Really? Okay, so I have my speculation about that, but what do you think? Tell me why.
It's the inflation measures.
I did exactly what I was
The
going to say.
inflation measures are not real.
Oh my God. I tell everyone that. I should have said that, but now because that's exactly what I was thinking. Tell me about that.
Okay, so, well... The first thing is that there has actually been some like formal economic work on it, and it was done by Larry Summers, the infamous or famous Larry Summers, however you view him, in the United States. And he showed that if you measured inflation like they measured it, I think pre-1990s or something like that, inflation didn't hit whatever, around 8%, I think the official numbers were in the US. It was instead closer to 20%. And the reason for that was that they took out mortgage payments, which is such a strange thing to take out. Mortgage and car loan payments. And I can tell you why they took it out, but it doesn't really matter that much. But but mortgage and car loan payments. Now, like, if you talk to anyone, especially in a society like the US where they like debt, let's put it that way, and you say, we're going to think about how much your monthly bills cost, but we're going to take out your mortgage, your car loans, and your credit card bills. People are like, that's like a significant amount of my monthly expenditure. So it's a stupid thing to do now, but that's already been established. But beyond that, I just don't think that things are being captured properly. I think the consumer price index has put in way too much emphasis on technological goods and way too little emphasis on stuff like food, which has gone up massively in price, stuff that you buy day to day. And so the rationale is that if like you don't need a DVD player anymore, you put in a weight into the consumption basket that like adjusts for that, because now you have a laptop and you watch Netflix or whatever. And even beyond that, it's kind of like tracking the prices of, I don't know, fridges or technology, vague technologies, but none of this stuff. Like when something like an iPhone goes up in price, nobody thinks like, oh, iPhones have gone up in price, month to month. It's like annoying. Okay, now it's more of a luxury product. It's more like a Dior bag or something like that. Fine, okay, but that's a completely different category to energy bills, food especially, and rent or mortgage payments. And these are the main, and education costs in the United States especially, healthcare too. Yeah. These are the main costs that people care about, and I just don't think the CPI is adequately capturing them. I mean, food prices must have, in the past 5 years, I'm guessing in the US, food prices doubled. I mean, probably, or 78, 80%.
Yeah.
That's a fundamental hit to living standards. And in Britain and in the rest of Western Europe, that's especially come through in electricity bills, due to the loss of Russian pipe gas into Europe.
Okay, so then if someone is listening to this and they're skeptical and they're thinking, oh, these guys, they're all gloom and doom, and would their retort be to you, well, then why hasn't the pound collapsed? Why hasn't the euro collapsed?
So the euro probably won't collapse. The pound has a significant chance of collapsing. I mean, the British government's effectively bankrupt. This isn't...
the American government is as well.
Not as bad as Britain. Britain is...
Do they have a higher debt to earnings?
Well, the thing is that debt to GDP... I'm not saying debt to GDP doesn't matter, but it's not the only variable in borrowing. And let me give you an example for that. The highest debt to GDP in the world is Japan. I think it's around 260% of GDP.
Yeah.
Japan can run that level of debt with a massive government deficit and have very little problem with borrowing day to day. And we can go into that why if you'd like, but just to be clear, the UK is currently at, I'm going to get it wrong, 110, maybe 110.
Can we pause on that just so that I'm clear on this?
Yeah.
But that has other implications, doesn't it? The currency goes down, it affects land prices, real estate prices. It affects everything.
The high debt load in Japan is the result of an aging society mostly, and it has massive economic effects. Sometimes the debt load itself isn't the cause, it's the symptom. But the point is, if you're talking about a borrowing crisis, that's literally when you try and go to a bank and take out a credit card and they say, no, we're not giving you another credit card. We're sick of you running up bills on your credit card, so you're not getting one. And then you say, okay, well, can I have a mortgage? It's like, you're not getting a mortgage. You can't even run a credit card. That's a borrowing crisis. And Japan is not even nearly there for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
At a much lower debt to GDP level in Britain, I think it's 100, 110, something like that. Less than half what Japan currently has, they're experiencing this borrowing crisis. When they try and issue gilts, they call them, government bonds into the market, they find it hard to issue these things. Now, the moment that you try and issue them and people just, especially foreign buyers, just say no, you get a sterling crisis. And that's what Britain's facing down. I've said publicly, and I stand by it, that by 2030, I think Britain will end up going to the IMF, broke. Turn the country over to into the receivership. The United States isn't quite there yet. And it's interesting, the United States is too big to go to the IMF. This is a really interesting thing to think through. But the treasury markets at the moment are highly illiquid. Interest rates are 4.7%. So interest rates on a 10-year bond might have changed in the past week. Last week, they were 4.7%. Europe's are on a German bond, 2.3%. Borrowing costs in the United States are double European borrowing costs. So much so that American corporates are currently borrowing in euros, in the euro. And I'm not saying that's never happened before, but the trend currently...
Okay, I'm unclear why.
Because the interest rate's lower. If I offer you a mortgage...
No, that I understand. Yeah. But I mean, so you explain it to me. All right, so I'm trying to think. So why and the reason they don't issue treasuries is because people just don't have enough trust in...
No, they are. So the U.S. government is issuing treasuries. It can sell them into the markets currently, but the markets are demanding a much higher price, 4.7% interest. And every 2 months you'll see an article in the Wall Street Journal saying there was kind of a bad treasury auction. So I don't think they're at the British level yet. which is, any shock could result in a debt auction that didn't clear in Britain. And this is well known in Whitehall and in the Bank of England, although they don't advertise it very much. In America, it hasn't got quite that bad. Europe, totally different situation, quite low interest rates, to the extent, as I said, American corporates are borrowing here. It's a bit of a disaster for America, though, because America, since 1945, has always tried to have lower interest rates than Europe. I mean, that was the kind of the dollar strength, king dollar kind of model. Make sure everyone in the world's borrowing in dollars.
Exactly.
And that means that when you go around with dollars in your pocket, no one ever refuses them, right? Well, that might be changing at the moment. Now, Europe has problems of its own, really.
And if that changes, the value of the dollar goes down.
It's already going down.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
It's
already going down.
It's gone down against the euro.
It's going down against all currencies. It's been going down for a few months. And if you I looked at the net short positions of dollars among fund managers last week. It's negative. It's short. It's net short for the first time in 20 years.
Wow.
There's a lot of indicators that the US dollar is losing its reserve currency status. And it basically, the triggering point was, the more long-term triggering point was the seizure of the Russian foreign exchange reserves. But the shorter-term triggering point that's actually, I think, pushed it over the edge were the tariffs, the Liberation Day tariffs. It's since then that we've started seeing these extreme dynamics. I saw an article 2 weeks ago on Bloomberg that said exporters are refusing dollars now. They're asking for other currencies. And the Chinese are actively, you read the Chinese press at the moment, they're talking about how to get RMB into everything. How do we issue more panda bonds? How do we do these dim sum bonds? How do we settle clear trade in RMB? But currency, countries are starting to do it. Because why would you want to accept dollars? So if you accept dollars as an exporter, you then have to use them, or somebody else in your country has to use them to import, right?
Correct.
But if there's a trade war on, it's uncertain. So you don't want to do that anymore. But the effects are already there. This isn't speculative anymore. I was writing about the potential for the US dollar to lose its reserve status shortly after the reserve seizure. But now it's not theoretical. And you'll see articles about it every other week in, The Atlantic or whatever. People are talking about it. Economists.
What do you think of the petrodollar?
I don't think... The petrodollar thing's always been a little bit overhyped. So all that it actually means is that you get quoted Brent or WTI prices in dollars, right? Now, quoting something in dollars means nothing. I can quote this glass of water in dollars to you. It doesn't really mean anything. The point is if you pay for the glass of water in dollars. Now, that actually means something. And yeah, oil transactions were mainly settled in dollars, but this was a result of the fact that most global trade was settled in dollars. So that's what I was saying. 2 weeks ago, there was a Bloomberg article saying exporters are no longer asking to diversify out of dollars. Also, the gold price is an indication of this. Central banks are buying up gold.
Gold's gone up. Yeah.
It's 3,400 or something, 32.
I guess I don't understand the whole RMB thing since that currency isn't set by the market. So I don't understand how they can just, why would anybody want that?
I think the Chinese, I think, from reading newspapers and so on, I think the Chinese are trying to find a way to have countries use RMB more without opening their capital account, without letting the currency freely float. And I think that's possible because after 1945, the Western world was basically dollarized. But there was fixed exchange rates under the initial, the initial Bretton Woods arrangement. It was pegged to gold. Yeah. Fort Knox was said to hold gold. it certainly held some gold. There was a James Bond film made about stealing the gold, and the currency was fixed. And yet, for example, the euro dollar market, I think, crops up before the end of Bretton Woods. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it was after, but I think it was before. So you can have a currency being massively influential while still having foreign exchange controls and capital account controls on it. And I think the Chinese in the next few years are going to try and figure out how to do an in-between situation. Greater RMB use abroad without opening the capital account and allowing the currency to freely float. Yeah.
So getting back, so you're in Hungary here primarily because of economic reasons, or no, or you just think the West is in decline and economic reasons.
I mean, I just think the West's in decline. I really think the West is in terminal decline. It doesn't have
terminal decline.
Maybe, at least for my lifetime. I mean, look, I said this to someone the other day. Like, I can't think outside of my own time frame and my kids' time frame, right? I mean, beyond that, like,
how old are you?
I'm 37.
Oh, dude, you're a young guy.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the lifetime I have to live. I only get one. So I have to think in those terms. And I'd like my children to have good opportunities. And I don't see that.
Do you have kids?
No, but I intend on.
Okay.
I don't see that in many Western countries, especially in Western Europe. I just don't see those opportunities there. I think probably the West isn't going to disappear, but it's probably going to take a generation or two to get itself back on track. The place is a mess. It's a mess at just about every level. The economy in Western Europe doesn't grow anymore. People have just given up on economic growth. They say, oh, well, it doesn't grow anymore. It doesn't really matter. There's no plans. The Western Europeans have no plans. All they're thinking about now is trying to rearm or something like that they can't afford.
Yeah.
They can't afford.
John O'Sullivan was telling me, I was floating him the figure, Trump wants to remove protection. He's talking about, NATO and Europe paying their quote-unquote fair share, which is a phrase that he uses. And I was saying, where do you think Europe is going to get the 5%? And he laughed. He chuckled. He said 5%. It's going to be more realistic about it. It's going to be an absolute minimum of 7 and probably 9. So that means you run debts, you raise taxes, or you cut spending.
No, that's going to happen.
Yeah, well then.
So it's a fantasy. This is the problem. Like, the West has descended into like fantasy politics. It's really sad to watch. But like none of the plans that are being put forward make any sense.
The West has descended into fantasy politics. Yeah,
it has. It's descended. Yeah, it's descended into fantasy politics. I mean,
what do you mean by that? Tell me.
None of any plan that you see put forward. I won't talk about America for now because there's been an interesting change of regime there. But in Western Europe, and in Britain's included in that, any plan that you see put forward is always like nonsense. Like, it doesn't add up. It's silly. I mean, I'll just give one example of Britain. Just before I left, or just after, Rachel Reeves, the new Chancellor, the Finance Minister, raised capital gains tax.
I think I met her, yeah.
Yeah, they raised capital gains tax, right? And like anyone, I used to work in the city in investing in London. Asset management I worked in, but the city's kind of an ecosystem of itself, and anyone could have told you if you raise capital gains tax, all the people who are kind of thinking of leaving anyway will leave, because they can even keep their kids in school in Britain. They can just go and live whatever it is, 100 and half the year plus 1 day in another country. You can get a train from London to Paris, for example, right? If you've ever got the Eurostar, it's a nice way to travel. And these guys have a lot of money, so it doesn't matter about paying a €250 return ticket on the Eurostar. So anyone could have told you, you're not going to raise taxes by raising capital gains taxes. You're going to chase out a bunch of rich people and you're going to lower taxes. And that's exactly what we've seen. It's a classic example of this fantasy politics. Anyone could have told the British Chancellor that was going to happen, but it doesn't matter. It's for show. It's to show that they're a Labour government and they care about the poor or whatever. But it's not just about the kind of like, more social democratic or socialist policies. It's everything. Everything's just reverted into a fantasy. Like the military rearmament campaign put out by Friedrich Merz. Like, first of all, as John O'Sullivan said, you need so much more money, and there isn't that money. But also, there isn't the productive forces to spend that money. So Europe's currently deindustrializing. Audi factories are closing everything because we don't have cheap energy, because the Russian pipe gas was shut off. We have to buy LNG, and so the equilibrium price of energy is higher in Europe than it is in the rest of the world, or like in America or China or whatever. And so we're seeing a deindustrialization take place in places like Germany and elsewhere, in Britain too, what's left of the industry. And so they're saying, well, we're going to build this big military-industrial complex to produce this loads of tanks at the same time as our automotive factories are shutting down. And you're like, what are you talking about? That's complete nonsense. That's not a real plan. That's a fantasy. And then when you say, well, what are you going to do? They go, we're going to print money. And you're like, okay, yeah, okay. So somebody gave a child the printing money machine, and he's like, I'm going to print money and buy a unicorn. It's like, well, unicorns don't exist. Yeah, I'm going to print the money because I might get a unicorn. And so everything's like this. I'm not saying literally 100% of policy is like this, but I haven't seen any realistic policy from Western Europe since the beginning of the war, basically. Probably since the pandemic, to be honest.
That's rather depressing.
Yeah, well,
I like Western Europe. I don't want them to commit suicide.
Can't stop it. I mean, I'd like if they stopped, but there's no indication that they'll stop.
I guess I'd love to ask you, what do you think they should do? But it seems the problems are too endemic.
No, they are. I think that's the issue. I think this will take a generation or two to resolve. They've dug themselves such a deep hole. It'll take a generation or two to dig themselves out of this hole. You can only really stem the bleeding at the moment, and there's no indication they're even going to do that. Do you know they're planning to pay for the reconstruction and integration of Ukraine into the European Union? Where's the money going to come from? I don't know. Go ask someone in Europe. Print the money. Print it.
Yeah,
print the money. And do they have the capacity to rebuild Ukraine? Like, okay, you can print the money, I guess.
We'll send in the Polish plumbers.
Maybe they're losing their jobs in a car factory, sure. But do we have? I don't even know what to make of it. It's just weird. It's content destroying itself. But there's we did some numbers on how much reconstruction and integration of Ukraine into the EU would cost, including supporting its military, which is part of the plan. Something like 12 times the European Commission's budget. And I think it was I can't remember the amount, but every Hungarian, and this would apply to every European because it's done on a per capita GDP basis, every Hungarian would have to pay something like a third of their annual salary or something over 5 years. So it wouldn't be, but it's a lot of money. But nobody's even, there's no plan on the table by the European Commission. There's nothing. They're just saying they're going to do it.
It's fantasy.
It's complete fantasy. It's just a descent into complete fantasy politics. And they live in a little bubble in Brussels, if you've ever visited.
I just gave a talk in Brussels.
And
what
did
a
you see
shithole. The place is a dump.
The place is a dump, but there's 2 or 3 nice neighborhoods, and it's where all the embassies are. And if you go and visit there, it's lovely, and there's a nice bar scene, and you can go out and you can get a drink at the bar and listen to people speak in Europeanized accent English about, well, we must integrate Ukraine. And it's you live in this little bubble, But here's the other problem. All of these fantasy projects pad the pockets of the Brussels elite. I'm not saying they're stealing, but I'm saying that when you open up the spigot in Brussels, everyone gets a taste, right? Everyone gets to dip their beak. They get their think tank gets money, or their friend in the defense industry gets money. And so even if the rest of the place is collapsing, and even if the whole thing's a fantasy, as long as you can keep the money spigot on in Brussels, it's good for the boys. And that really started in the pandemic, because it was only in the pandemic that Brussels were given the permission to issue their own bonds. And it's getting deeper and deeper. And the Hungarians are one of the only countries opposing this now. But we've centralized money-making power in Brussels completely. And I just think these guys are going to grift. I think it's going to get really bad. And they can just keep putting out big spending packages to keep their little lifeboat afloat.
Interesting. In all of this conversation, you didn't even mention at all the migration crisis.
I mean, that's almost just baked in at this point, right?
Yeah.
It's just baked in. Nobody even... it's so depressing in Europe. I remember, 10, 15 years ago, any time there was a terror attack, people would go, oh, wow, and there'd be headlines, and we'd light up the buildings and everything. There's one every couple of weeks, and people just go, oh, yeah, okay. People have just accepted that that's the reality now. It's awful. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I find the Douglas Murray the strange the slow death of Europe. It's a strange slow death, and it's something people have brought on themselves. It's utterly heartbreaking to me. I don't know what to do about it. I have no idea.
Well, I just laughed. I mean, I just laughed. There's no point. I mean, I love Europe too. I'm a European, and I still get to live in Europe because I live here, and it's a European city, and it's one of the most beautiful cities in Europe.
So Ireland is in the EU.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't affected by Brexit?
It was, but in different ways.
But I mean, you can still live. You're like people from, like we were just talking about Matt Goodwin.
Yeah.
He just can't come here. He needs to get all this rigmarole. Whereas before, pre-Brexit, he could have just gotten a plane and he could buy a house here and everything. Can you buy a house here legally?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a European citizen, so we're fine. But no, that's the really heartbreaking thing about the Brexit thing, because all the Brits who saw the decline that was setting into their country thought that leaving the European Union would solve that decline. It did not. It did not at all. It didn't make it worse.
I
don't think it made it worse. It may, I don't know. But it may have sped up the decline of the city. Anyway, it definitely did not solve the problems. And now they've created a roach motel in Britain. There's no getting out. Like there is, but you have passport that won't let you travel in Europe. That the British passport really can only make it easier for you to get a visa in the Commonwealth countries. So in Australia, Canada, and so on. Loads of people are going to Australia right now from Britain. But I think at a certain point they might actually have to tighten up control on those passports if things get really bad in Britain. I mean, things are getting really bad in Britain. People always say I'm constantly bashing Britain on my Twitter account. I'm really not. I really like Britain. I spent most of my adult life there. But the situation is so bad, like ignoring it isn't doing anyone any favor.
When you say the situation, you mean the economic, the migration, what kind of
everything? It's like
energy situation,
like poly crisis. It's like what is going right? I mean, the public transport's not working in London properly. Have you been recently? It's late all the time. Yeah. TfL used to be absolutely phenomenal. It's not anymore.
Yeah.
Birmingham is the second biggest city in the UK. It does not have reliable garbage collection, and the city is infested with rats. The headline in the Daily Mail was "Rats the size of cats," and everyone in Britain. I saw some of my British friends came over here recently, and we were talking, and somebody said "rats the size of cats." Everyone's saying that.
Answer me. I have one comment and then one question to you. So whenever I talk to people on the left, they tell me this isn't true. Whenever I talk to people on the right, they tell me it's true. Is Hungary being fined for not letting migrants into this country?
Yeah, that's not, like there shouldn't be any dispute on that. Yeah, they are. I mean, it's for the migration ban during the migration wave.
Yeah.
So it's a retrospective fine, as far as I understand it. But I think the €1 million a day or whatever
that's what was my understanding.
I think I could be wrong on this, but I think if they cry uncle, they can get rid of that fine and move to accept migrants or something like that. But the really ironic thing about this is everyone in Europe is now in agreement. Not everyone on the continent, but all in politics, everyone's in agreement that the migration wave was a massive mistake. The Merkel letting them in.
Utter catastrophe.
But everyone knows this, and the country's being fined for not doing it. So there's a recognition you were right not to do that, but we're going to fine you because you did. And at that point, you're starting to see the reality of Brussels' attitude toward power. It's not about good governance. It's not about getting things right. It's about staying in line, doing what you're told.
Yeah. Anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
Not really. I mean, I plugged the book a little bit. So it's The Collapse of Global Liberalism and the Rise of the Post-Liberal Order. It was out in the UK at the end of May, which I believe means that Americans can buy the ebook. But the physical book's coming out at the beginning of September.
Cool. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. And that goes through. That has a lot of this. It has the military stuff, demographic stuff. It actually does have a policy on a chapter on energy policy as well.
Awesome. Where can people find you?
Most of my stuff's up on Twitter at Philip Pilk, PhilipPilk. I usually post anything that I do there, but yeah.
Yeah, a lot of positive. Our second interview, a lot of positive feedback from the first interview. Tons of positive emails and stuff. So
it's great.
That's great.
Good to hear.
Anyway, thanks for talking to me.
Thanks for having me, Peter. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Philip.